Hello, our opening panel for CTF Saudi Arabia is What's Next for Sustainability and Digital Innovation in Saudi's Mega Projects market, or in Saudi's mega projects. As Saudi Arabia moves ahead with its ambitious transformation guided by Vision 2030, how will technology, social and environmental trends drive the Kingdom's mega projects delivery? Here to discuss this with me, we have David Watkins, Chief of Project Delivery at Amaala and representing also the Red Sea Development Company. Sama Abu-Hijleh, Group Chief Projects Execution Officer at Roshn. Engineer Ahmad Alaboudi, Chief Regulatory Affairs, Saudi Contractors Authority. And Andrew Rippon, Smart City Director at the Royal Commission for AlUla. We'll start with, I think, looking at Saudization and talent. So Ahmed, as we know, there are ambitious targets for Vision 2030 in terms of city and infrastructure development. How are you trying to transform the contractor sector? What do you see as the key goals?
Thank you, Andrew. And to start with, as you said, Saudization is a very important aspect in the whole subject. The rate of Saudis today in the construction sector is very low. It's around 50%. And we look at that as very important aspect that we have to raise and improve. To do that, actually, we're doing two things. One is to develop programs to develop Saudis and to develop some talents in the sector. And we also working in the transformation of the sector itself. Most of the sector operation today happening in the site. And we are working in studies in order to see the possibility to transform the operation from the site to the factory. And by doing that, we'll have more chances for Saudization and to put more Saudis in the process of the construction.
And are there other aspects? I mean, you've talked about developing that talent. I mean, obviously, this is also about diversifying the economy as well. Are you also trying to look at things like how to, break barriers between Saudi Arabia and contractors, how to transfer knowledge into and out of the country as well, so that there's that international spread?
True. Actually, that's what we are doing as well. Sorry, not mentioning that, but we are trying to create the links and connection between the Saudi contractors here in Saudi and other contractors in other countries. We already have some steps between Saudi Arabia and UK. We have some steps between Saudi Arabia and Russia, Saudi Arabia and China. We have done a few of them, and the point or the goal that we're trying to achieve is to have some partnerships between the two contractors that helps us to transform the knowledge, transform the experience from other markets into the Saudi Arabia market. Okay,
and then do you think this will also, as it develops over time, I mean, I'm assuming this is a long-term strategy. It's not a kind of a 1 or 2 year strategy. Is that correct? Your strategy of trying to develop this, it's a long-term strategy, but I'm just wondering, will it also help you with things like project schedules, costs, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a long-term strategy, as you just said. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's very important that we start. Today we have mega projects, and we are trying to help those mega projects as much as we could. We have open dialogue with most of the mega projects in Saudi Arabia, trying to see what are the talents they need and to see how we can help them. We also try to see the contractors that already have the capability or the capacity to participate in that, and we try to promote them. We have some events tailored mainly for establishing that communication platform between everyone. Those are short terms, but in the long term, yes, we have this strategy that we are working on. It's going to take a few years because it's not also one destination or one entity show. It's a study that will have a roadmap that will bring together so many government and private sector entities together in order to develop the market toward the transformation into the factory rather than the site.
So David, turning to you now, I know that, and I'm coming to you deliberately second, because I know that you're part of what you're doing is working with bodies such as the Saudi Contractor Authority and the Saudi Council of Engineers. So how are you trying to educate and promote good practices in the kingdom, develop local talent, and make sure that knowledge is spread?
Look, the key for us has been working with these government bodies, and the SCA, the SCE, Vocational Training School, the Local Procurement Authority as well. On the contractor side, for us, it's about looking at how we package works as well. It's no good us having multi-billion SAR packages that exclude many of the local Saudi companies who are much smaller. So we've looked at sort of a multi-pronged approach. Is how do we allow the local contractors of all sorts of size and scale participating in the projects, from the smallest to the biggest? How do we work with the SCA and build their capacity and leverage the SCA's databases in terms of their pre-qualification of these local contractors? And then on the training side, our cooperation agreement that runs with the SCA also talks about sourcing staff and accessing their database. A lot of the engineers in the construction sector in Saudi Arabia have naturally come from Aramco and are very oil and gas focused. So we're working, with the SCA, the SCE, and the other authorities on how do we actually have training programs that move them more towards the real estate side of the business, which is, what our projects, and my projects in particular, are focused on. And the vocational training school together with the SCA, so we can look at that local employment and employing people out of the local townships and running vocational training programs for people who don't necessarily have a degree, but are locally based, and therefore we want to focus a lot of our Saudiization on the local employment, not just Saudi-wide employment.
Yeah, I know the interesting thing with certainly on the Red Sea development side of things is I know that the CEO John Pagano has talked about eventually, once everything is up and running fully, it creating something like 70,000 jobs. And I know that there are already in place schemes to both encourage employment locally. So you have it's the nursery scheme, I think, is one that was recently launched. You also have the hospitality programs that you're running as well. So there's a lot of interesting programs that are running to create both direct and indirect employment through the developments you're producing.
Absolutely, and it's the focus previously was on sort of the future hospitality sector and hospitality employment. What John and myself and Ian Williamson on the Red Sea have been working on is how do we actually focus that training on the construction sector as well, and again, degree and non-degree qualified people, and getting them involved in the construction sector. And the nursery scheme is getting unskilled local Saudis from Al-Waj and Umlaj and other townships on the west coast, and bringing them in and upskilling them, not just for the construction period, but when the resorts are operating, they'll have opportunities in the maintenance and groundkeeping, the operation side of the hotel. So that long-term multi-generational employment for those townships, which is a big part, obviously, of the 2030 vision.
Okay, and Andrew, turning to you, AlUla is an ancient region. It has connections all the way up to, it's the Nabatean, isn't it? It has connections with.
Correct.
Yeah, so again, is this something you're looking at? How do you mentor and develop teams and increase that talent?
No, absolutely. And, as you were quite rightly saying, we are here in AlUla building an open air museum to leverage the natural beauty of the place, and also the thousands of years of history. So to put it in context, this morning I cycled past the lions of Dadan, who have stared out at the world for virtually the entirety of human civilization. 7,000 years, which is an incredibly humbling thing to look at. So along with that, this is a town that has existed for obviously a long time, and the local population in the county of around 50,000 people are now looking to the Royal Commission to say, right, what activities are you going to put in place? And there are a number of activities that have been put in place, both in the areas of the traditional sort of tourism jobs. So there's a lot of, so for example, we've opened the Old Town. There are a lot of shops where locals, including local ladies, have been employed in shops, but also we've all opened 2 hotels. So there's that side of it. We're now putting in a whole bunch of new infrastructure, so there's going to be that side of it. And from the smart city perspective, we're also looking to upskill locals into coding. So we want to do some agile coding pieces to get locals to code their own applications and or eventually do work with the Royal Commission.
Okay, and Sama, your scheme obviously is focused around local housing, or schemes, I should say, around local housing. So again, for you, what are you doing in terms of making sure that you're trying to train, pass knowledge on, develop talent?
Well, Rob, as you know, our mandate is pretty significant. We are tasked with basically delivering upward of 400,000 homes by the end of the decade in various regions in the kingdom. And part of our mandate is basically maximizing local content and Saudi content, as well as promoting and pioneering modular construction methods in the kingdom, which we see as a key tool and a key strategy for managing the scale we are dealing with. We see our most challenging aspect to be the scale of what we are mandated to accomplish. It's kind of unprecedented in the country, in the region, and maybe even globally. So we see that relying on local resources, scaling up local resources and capability and capacity, increasing the capacity of local contractors to do larger projects, encouraging suppliers to upscale their production and inventory in country. And we're engaging in all these with all these partners in various ways to discuss basically unconventional ways of partnering with them to encourage them to invest in maximizing local content, maximizing Saudiization in their organizations, in converting construction as much as possible from a site installation process to a plant manufacturing process, which we think will require a higher set of skills and will be more attractive and more conducive to participation of young Saudis in the industry, which has been a challenging subject for the industry for many years.
I think what we'll do now is let's turn to the technologies that are being used and employed to build these schemes, because that's the focus of this conference, and that's really what you're here to talk about, and it fits very nicely, I think, with the Saudiization and with the talent discussion that we've had. Before I ask the first question on digital technologies, just to remind people that you can ask questions in the Q&A function, which is to the right of your video window. I can see that there are already questions coming through. We'll get to those towards the end of this this session. Ahmed, I'm going to start with you. Now, when I've spoken to you and we've talked about digitalization within Saudi Arabia, in terms of these new models of delivery, it's still quite early, I think, for digitalization. So are there regulations that need to be in place, or are you looking at what regulations need to be in place so that contractors can start to use some of these new approaches, such as Sama was mentioning, modular construction there?
Yeah, that's very true. The regulations that are in place today, they are not encouraging moving toward those technologies. There are a few things that need to be changed in order to prepare the environment to adopt these kind of technologies. And we are trying to get all of those in one package as part of the study that we're making for transforming the sector. On the other side, we are also trying to encourage the early adopters of the technology by trying to design a package of advantages that we are trying to promote through the policy setters, so that we can help the early adopters to adopt, so that Samir and his team can find people that they could rely on and could work with. At the same time, we are working to prepare the environment, as you said, in the regulation side, and also in the industrialization of the sector. Digitalization, as you said, it's very early. I think also going with certain type of digitalization like the VR and stuff like that, maybe not be able. There are some concepts in the market already, just like the 3D printing, but in order to put that in production, it's still too costly compared to the conventional ways of construction. But there are certain things like what Samir mentioned, the modular forms of construction, the sandwich panels, the steel structures. There are a lot of things that could promote mass building or a high scale building, and those can be adapted today. We just need to prepare the environment for it. As I said, part of the study that we are doing, we are trying to put all of those in one package, and we take it to the policy sector so that we make sure that they are changed all at once and the environment is good for that. And the other package, I'm just repeating myself, but the other package, we would like to promote the early adopters as much as we could.
So these packages that you're putting together for regulations, they'll then what, go through a process of being approved, and roughly how long does that take?
Truly timeline, it's supposed to happen within the coming 6 months to finish the study. So that's for the study, but how long it's going to take to change, I cannot predict that. But there are certain items, just like we just released the Saudi code, and that's the Bible of the construction in Saudi Arabia. It does not recognize most of the technology, the new technology. So that's part of the things that we'd like to change. There are certain items in the building permits, and people need to comply with it, or they have to sign that they will comply. There are other things that we will need to do. So we need to put all of those in one package so that we take it as one package to the highest authority, so that becomes a change once and for all. But it will take time. I can't predict the time, how long it's going to take.
Okay, but then once that's in place, in terms of getting the permits for whatever aspects of these technologies are needed, it will just become much easier at that point.
I hope so. I hope
okay.
so.
Okay. So David, turning to you, what are the major digital technologies that Amaala is looking at and trying to use?
So look, there's a number of different platforms out there, but as we've previously discussed, you know, one of the challenges and one of the, I guess, the first steps that, you know, we've embarked on is about data classification. You know, there's a number of different platforms out there, and I'm sure Andrew is finding this where he is it tends to be, you know, digitalization and digital twinning and smart destination tends to be sort of an afterthought and done at the very end of the construction cycle, whereas in reality it needs to be done at the very beginning. You know, we need to be classifying the data at the right way, so whatever platforms that we're using can actually talk to each other, and a table in one platform is a table in another platform, which is not really the case in a lot of what we do today. So that's what we've spent a lot of time focusing on, you know, with ISO 27001, looking at OmniClass and UniClass, and creating information classification databases so that all our information, not just on the construction site, but across the whole enterprise, is classified in the right way. And then adopting different sort of platforms to sort of create our what we call our project twin, and looking at bringing the information together in a project digital twin, and working with the designers so that the BIM guidelines support this. The information we get from the design, from the inception, can be built into a project digital twin, and then later on that translates into an operational digital twin and supports all the operational twinning that's required for that smart destination. So a lot of our focus is on that. The platforms we're using, whether we call it 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 1000D BIM, all those additional layers of information that can be used in a meaningful way. The big challenge is we collect lots and lots of data. We don't code it very well or classify it very well, so the data isn't able to be visualized and used in the right way. And that's one of the biggest challenges at the moment with sort of digital construction, is getting that data, classifying it, developing it, using it in a model environment, because that's the sort of the future of where we're heading, rather than the old EDMS systems that have been around for 20 years. And then having that data visualized in the right way where it's useful. For me, on Amaala, our budget's about 110 billion SAR across all the projects. I'll end up with just a construction staff of well over 1,000 people. The information that is available is too much for me to be able to digest without it being presented in a useful, meaningful way. So I can focus my time and my team's effort in the areas that need that focus, and not focus our time and effort on every little thing that's taking place on the site.
So you're looking at setting clear data goals right at the beginning, so that people understand what's being collected, how, where it's being stored, why, how it's going to be used. And then you've obviously trying to put in place clear goals in terms of making sure people understand what the end point of this is.
Yeah, and one of the challenges of the classification tables at the moment is we've looked at it from an enterprise-wide approach, so that the people in HR are producing documents are classified and can be used in a unified way, not just the construction site itself. And one of the challenges of this is the classification tables that are set up and established in ISO and other areas don't look at that sort of enterprise-wide approach. So we've had to create bespoke elements that use multiple different classification tables, so that we can then classify that data across the whole enterprise and then use it in a meaningful way. And then the software that we use, or the platforms that we use, are we can be a little bit agnostic to those, because as long as the data is classified in the same way, the platforms can, talk to each other. But there are a number of good platforms out there that sort of unify all that information. Yeah.
And that's a very interesting point you're making there, actually, is the data agnostic aspect, because it's essential for things like digital twins. And again, you've talked about that being one of your aims, is to have that in place. And from what I'm understanding, from what you're saying, it sounds like what you're doing is trying to put the digital twin in place from the beginning, not have one at the end.
Yeah, look, the data's been gathered, it's just not being used. And the operational twins you need for smart destinations later on, you need a lot of the data that we're gathering now. One of the challenges we're facing on the regulatory front, but the authorities are aware of this, is some of the data security laws. A lot of the platforms nowadays are cloud-based. Saudi has data security laws that require information to be housed in Saudi Arabia, rightly so. And having those cloud-based platforms like Azure, like Amazon, Google, setting up servers inside the country, inside the kingdom, that allow us to fully utilize those. So, one of our challenges at the moment is with cloud-based platforms is we can only use certain elements of the cloud-based, not their entire, not the entire system. And that's something the kingdom's working on, and we're sort of speaking at the highest level to sort of resolve some of those issues, which will allow Saudi to move into that, that digital construction and smart destination frame, much more quickly.
I'm going to Andrew. I'm going to ask you some questions around cloud as well, actually. I think it's a very interesting area, but let's start by just getting, again, that overview of what technologies you're looking to use, how you're trying to put them in place. And again, I know that you're looking at digital twin as well. So what kind of approach are you taking?
Yeah, okay, thanks. So I think in terms of technology, well, first of all, I'd 100% back what David was saying. Data is critical. And at the Royal Commission for AlUla, we're actually in the process of setting up a data office, because we're also part real estate and part local government. So we actually have regulatory authority on certain things. And so we have to look at it from the full spectrum, not just as a real estate operation, but also as local government and husbandry of the livability and services for the local population as well. So we're, in terms of technologies, I think that with smart city starts with looking at what are we trying to achieve. It starts with the user journeys of the visitors, the citizens, the investors, etc. But at the end, we have to power it with some technology. And right now, we're very much looking at digital twin as a unifying force for a number of sub systems that are being used, so that we get a single point of truth across planning, development, construction, and municipal operations. And then, much like David was describing, we have actually started with what we're calling Smart County Control Platform, which we launched at FII last week. And basically that will take all the digital twin data and use it to synchronize all the operations. So for example, the firemen will know where the municipality have moved all the fire hydrants, example. So we're it's all about getting things together to speak to each other. They don't have to be the same platforms, but they need to speak to each other, as much as David was also saying. I think one of the additional things that we're introducing into that process is a trust layer. So because we're not just our own operator, we are a government entity operating government services. What we want to do is have a trust layer that helps interface between the Royal Commission, the private sector, and different government entities, because of course entities in at the country level are very important, such as Ahmad is representing here, and many other entities. So we're going to put in what we're calling a trust layer, which is basically this sort of distributed ledger that ensures that whatever transactions have happened are not disputable further down the line, right? So it's not just RCU owning that platform and that data. RCU is the short for Royal Commission for AlUla. It's not just RCU owning all of that. It is also, we are committing and giving transparency on whatever transactions they may be. They may be a land transfer, they may be a license for exploitation, it may be a planning approval of some sort. So those things cannot be disputed to have happened. I think that's one of the lessons that we very much are taking, technologies that have come to maturity in the last 5 years, and that's one of them. And obviously we're also looking at some other technologies, but we're very much focused on the here and now, today process and delivery. As I was saying, we've just delivered 2 hotels, and we're in the process of revolutionizing the municipality services. So we're actually having to deliver in the short term as well as the plans for the next 15 years.
So I'm very interested in your use of, I mean, you said distributed ledger, so I guess what you're talking about is blockchain, in the proper sense of the word.
Yes.
This obviously gives you full transparency. You're using this, or you're planning to use this within the construction processes as well as post-construction when you're doing things like land sales. And so
yes.
So
yes,
that will
exactly.
give you, and so if you're, and is that going to be linked with your digital twin as well?
Absolutely.
Or with your BIM model?
Absolutely. Because all it does is it registers transactions on a common ledger. It doesn't do any of the functionality that a BIM system, that an ERP system like SAP, any of those functionalities, doesn't do any of that. What it does, and very well, is it takes the transactions from those and registers them on a common ledger. And therefore, further down the line, and those can be verified by those systems. So further down the line, those transactions have another advantage, which is real-time audit. So if there's an auditing of all these transactions, there is no need for weeks of compiling paper and maybe making it slightly look like more, better than it is or whatever. It's real-time audit. The auditor has the same copies of everything as all of the systems that produce them. So there are many advantages, and we're using that same platform then for a number of other use cases that are not in the administrative, let's say, area, but we're using it, for example, to help preserve digitally preserve the cultural assets of the county for the people of Saudi Arabia.
That's very interesting as well, but in terms of how you're going to do that. And auditing is actually kind of where I was trying to lead that as well. And that's what I was thinking was maybe that's what you were trying to achieve. It means that later on, should there be a dispute or a question, you have that transparency to actually check easily. And are you thinking of using this as well in things like contracts?
Yes, obviously the famous term smart contract within the distributed ledger world comes from financial transactions. However, it can do almost anything. And so this is the sort of the next level. For now, we're doing much as Estonia did, much as I was involved in some of that work in Dubai as well, and much as the European Commission is doing, starting with the basics of having that distributed ledger and being able to have that single source of truth. And then we can take much more complicated things and start to automate what I call true digital automation, because for 20 years we've had websites from government, but that didn't really automate things. So when I'm talking about true digital automation, it really is in leveraging all the systems that are involved, but automating the transactions. So it has a lot of scope. It is at the beginning. There are some regulatory things we need to also work on, and we want to, of course, align with the national strategy, which is ongoing.
And finally, just briefly, David mentioned cloud, and I know again that you're working on different levels of cloud, be that international cloud as we normally think about it, or local cloud, cloud at customer.
Yes, exactly. We have 5 levels of cloud, which is we're sort of starting to educate people to think in this way. And the normal cloud, as you're saying, is what people think of is the international cloud. Now, the national cloud is very interesting because the government has issued their cloud first policy, which is very simple. You spend more than 5 million SAR, you have to justify why it's not on a national cloud. Done. As a government entity. And there are four national clouds certified for government service, including the 3 telcos. So, and then we then talk about, our own on-prem systems, micro data centers, and edge of the network. So that's the kind of the 5-level cloud.
Okay, I'm going to turn now to Sama. You mentioned your very ambitious build target right at the beginning when we were talking about Saudiization, which is 400,000 units over 8 years, which, with my rough calculation is 50,000 units a year. I know you're turning to modular, and you talked about the fact that you're turning to modular. It seems a very sensible approach as well, turning to modular to try and meet that target. So just tell us a little bit more about what scheme you're doing and what other technologies you're planning to use, and what sort of benefits do you expect to get from going offsite and modular?
Well, let me explain a little bit more, Rob, why we're seriously turning to modular. When you take the number you just mentioned, which is about 40 to 50,000 housing units per year, year in, year out for the next 10 years, and we project our demand for major construction materials, anything from porcelain tiles to electrical distribution panels. The magnitude of quantities we get outstrips the total supply capacity of the local market at present. So that to us presents a major risk and a major challenge. Also, if you take that pipeline of work and you estimate roughly how many workers, construction workers, would be at our various sites at any one time, we're reaching numbers in the hundreds of thousands of workers. And as everybody who's worked in the industry here in Saudi Arabia realizes, and in the region, securing skilled labor is no easy task. This is a constant challenge for all contractors for various reasons. And one of the first topics that every contractor we engage with on how we can partner and work together to deliver this scale, the first request they make of us is, how can you help us get more labor or get more visas? So we are convinced that the issue, the challenges we have in terms of labor supply, material supply, cannot continue to be tackled the traditional way. We have to find ways to reduce the labor footprint on sites. And we have to find ways to use many different types of materials, including alternative and engineered materials that are traditionally not used in conventional in situ construction. So to tackle those challenges, we are doing two things. We are working with major suppliers, and we're actually holding our first Roshn partnership roadshow or construction conference on November 14th, where we'll be meeting with all the local contractors and suppliers and consultants to see how we can basically to start engaging on solutions to deal with these challenges. And one of the things we are doing is basically looking at multi-project, long-term framework supply agreements with major suppliers, not only to extract competitive pricing, but primarily to secure the supply. We see the supply issue as a very big risk, especially that we have ambitious plans, and all our sister companies in the PIF DevCos have ambitious plans, and the Saudi general development sector and construction sector will see some significant activity in the next 10 years. So we'll all be competing for the same limited resource. So we're going to basically, we're exploring bespoke, unconventional supply agreements with elements of offtake guarantee, so that suppliers can be confident enough of the pipeline to invest in expanding their local production capacity, their inventory, which historically tends to be very shallow. Material inventory in Kingdom tends to be very shallow. So we want to encourage suppliers and supply chain partners to invest now in expanding their production capacities and their inventory, basically in preparation for meeting this spike in demand. The other thing we want to do is be a pioneer or a trendsetter or an early adopter of modular construction technologies. And we have a two-pronged approach, a short-term approach and a long-term approach. The short-term approach is to leverage what has traditionally been the only semi-modular construction method in Kingdom, which is mostly two-dimensional precast concrete. And we're working with the major precasting players in country to set up site-specific, dedicated facilities, modern, highly automated to the extent possible, much more automated than you've seen so far, to basically produce 2D precast concrete panels for our standard designs, which is another important element, standardization of design and standardization of materials, to basically make the what we're building more modular friendly, more precast friendly, and also ease the life of our supply chain in terms of being able to procure standard products. And the intent is to push the limit in terms of doing more in the factory, not just precast panels, but approximate what has been done with pods for bathrooms and kitchens, and try to do more for other than toilets and bathrooms, including fixing doors, painting, second fix, possibly third fix, and so on. Long-term approach is to move away from concrete and go truly and completely modular with alternative materials like light gauge steel and pre-engineered materials, including drywall, a gypsum board, cement board, and being basically able to assemble entirely integrated assemblies, rooms, size of buildings, parts of buildings in the factory, and then transport them as kind of Lego pieces that come together on site. This is not new technology. It exists in the world. It's been used in the world, but traditionally there has been resistance locally for it for a number of reasons or a number of challenges. One has to do with basically the local supply chain does not really support it. I mean, if you were to try to implement it today, you would have to import a lot of materials. There's not enough in-country production or inventory of the materials you would like to use. Second is there's a general perception that architecturally it could be less than pleasing aesthetically, and that's not true. There are also solutions for that. And lastly, one of the more anecdotal challenges is that people wanting to knock on the wall and hear a solid echo and not a hollow echo, which I think is something we will move beyond, as many other countries and other societies has moved beyond. So we also believe this modularization approach not only will help us deal with the scale issue we have, scale up production, improve quality of production, reduce the amount of snagging you do on site, reduce the amount of supervision you need on site, and reduce the footprint and time on site, but will also introduce opportunities for higher employment of Saudi youth. We think the kind of skill sets and the type of tasks you will see in that environment will attract more Saudi youth to join the industry, which traditionally has been a challenge for us to attract Saudi youth to join the construction industry or the building industry. And that's something we have to address and we have to tackle. And I think this is one way we can make it more attractive and attract more Saudi youth who have the right skill sets to help us with this strategy.
Okay, and Ahmed, I'm going to turn to you. Something that Samo just mentioned was about reducing the footprint. And I know that this is important for everybody actually who's on this panel right now. So in terms of sustainability, we know there are increased expectations around things like material use, energy use, etc. What do you see as the main challenges today, and what role is the SCA playing in trying to promote sustainability?
Actually, there are a few things that we could address in here. One, mainly that we try to make sure that we kill the reasons for the bad sustainability right from the beginning. And what we are doing toward that, we are trying to qualify the contractors and make sure that they have the proper qualification before they start, so that we try to kill most of the issues before they start. We just, what happens today in the contracting sector, lots of intruders in the sector. Everybody is trying to be a contractor. And what happens is that the product, the end product comes with a low quality, with lots of problems, the bad sustainability overall, and the maintenance cost is so high. So in order to avoid that, we're trying to qualify the contractors right from the beginning. The other thing that what David and Andrew talked about, especially in digitalization, that's something that's very important when it comes to the operation of the facilities. When we are talking about the adapting technologies and preparing the environment for technology, we are talking about initiating the construction at the beginning. But after we have that, we are looking closely at what the teams in AlUla and Amaala and Red Sea and other projects, looking at what they are going to do with the operation of their project, because I think we're going to have very interesting pilot projects for how to improve the sustainability of the entire community rather than just the buildings. And I think we're going to have very good examples there that we could adopt and build on, rather than we try to do something from our end and we might not be successful. We know that there are people who are very specialized, very talented, and well positioned to bring very good examples to how to do operating the facilities. So that's one side. I think it's a very interesting practice that they are doing, and we're looking closely, overwatching what they're doing, interested to see how they're going to do it next. And from our side, as I said, we're doing it to try just at the beginning for the contractors to make sure that we have qualified contractors that our friends here can have partners that they trust, and also that will reflect in the sustainability of the products that they're producing. The other aspect is the capabilities or the talents that work in there. And we talked about that earlier, that we are trying also to prepare talents for that, transforming the construction side to go to model or to go to the other lightweight materials, sandwich panels, other stuff that also will give us, we no more will need the highly skilled people. We need just people that will know how to operate the assembly process, how to operate the machine that will make those products. Overall, I think all of those activities together will contribute to the sustainability big time.
Okay, we are getting a lot of questions from the audience, actually. So I think what I'll do is we'll have two very brief answers, maybe, if we could, from David and Andrew to the next questions, and then let's spend a bit of time on the Q&A. So David, when people talk about sustainability, I mean, obviously we're including worker welfare here. How are you working with the local contractors to try and promote that aspect of sustainable delivery and worker welfare?
Well, as we all know, sustainability is quite a broad, quite a broad topic. Modern methods of construction to minimise waste, all those sorts of things. But specifically about not just our worker welfare, but our employee welfare as well. So on the worker welfare side, what we've done, as a lot of the giga and mega projects have done, is we've taken charge of our welfare facilities, and rather than calling it a workers' camp, our construction village where we house our labour is designed in a sustainable way. So it's looking at the temporary situation, not just the permanent works, and making sure the welfare of the workers is treated in the right way as well. Not putting 30 people in a small room. Our power and water consumption is sustainable. We have solar hot water generation for all the workers. Highly insulated modular rooms to minimise the waste during construction, but also to minimise the cooling costs. In Saudi Arabia, the minimisation of water usage through grey water systems in the camps, all those sorts of things that sort of help instill that point of sustainability for everybody from day zero. As well as obviously working with the designers to make sure our buildings are sustainable and designed to green values. The quality of workmanship in the construction is there, so the life cycle of the buildings and what we're building on the resort side is, has a longevity. That means the maintenance costs are less, the labour required to maintain is less. Linking into smart destination and all those things that Samir and Andrew and Ahmed have discussed, and how do we tie that all in together to make sure the whole project is done in a sustainable way. But that worker welfare has traditionally been a challenge in many parts of the world, and it has certainly been under the spotlight in the last decade. And I think all of the projects, and certainly with the support of the Saudi Contractors Authority, is setting those minimal standards of bringing the workers in, making sure that they're comfortable when they're here. And, from my perspective on Amaala and also on the Red Sea, if we have worker conditions that are better than some of the other projects, then, realistically, we can attract those workers to our projects, which is a limited resource.
Okay, and then Andrew, briefly, I suppose, because of the ancient nature of the area, similar for you.
Yeah, I think that is a challenge. Also, we have to challenge ourselves in how we're not only the workforce that are coming in, but also the workers that we're bringing and the local citizens. So I think for us, sustainability is a big challenge to be able to bring in construction into desert areas with no infrastructure, as many of the people present will understand, is a challenge. So for example, we've looked at, can we, in a new development that we're doing, which is based around natural beauty and art in the landscape, called Wadi Al Fan, we're looking at, how can we reduce the environmental impact of the construction phase, for example. And there are many other areas where we're looking at sustainability. For example, we're now looking at how, again, that distributed ledger can help us with potential for local power generation. So there's a number of areas, and we have actually a full sustainability study that we're now putting into action. So
okay,
that's where we're at.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to audience questions because we've got a lot of questions. Sama, I'm going to ask you the first one, but before we do, I have a poll, our first poll of the day, that we would like to ask you, the audience. So you will see the poll come up to the right of your screen where you have the Q&A function. Next to that, if you hover over that, is polls. The first poll that we're going to ask today is, what will be the single biggest enabler to Saudi Arabia delivering its ambitious construction projects and targets? So if you could please give your answer to that whilst we continue with our audience Q&A. So Sama, turning to you, first question I've got is, of the total 400,000 units, what percentage approximately will be built using traditional construction methods, and what percentage will be using modern methods such as modular?
Well, the intent is to basically build most, if not all of it, using some form of modular construction, even if it's limited to basically 2D precast concrete panels. So our first project out of the gate, Sadra in Riyadh, with 3,000 homes, is actually utilizing entirely precast concrete. But our ambition is to move, as the market matures, with our support and encouragement, to adopt more modular forms of construction, because we don't see a way to produce and deliver 40 to 50,000 homes any other way. It's just not possible. So although we do not preclude that we may have some utilization of traditional or in situ construction, especially for some sites that may be remote or may not be conducive to a modular approach, but our intent is to basically maximize as much as possible utilization of modular construction method. Okay,
turning to Ahmed. Sorry, I have questions coming up both on my WhatsApp and on the front end. So let me just go to one of the WhatsApp ones. How do you capture best practices being followed by contractors and ensure it is adopted by others?
What we did a bench study with the I think around 11 different markets. And we tried to get the best practices, and based on that, we built our qualification for the contractors. And with the contractors registers with the SCA, we try to make sure that they comply with those pre-qualification. Right now, after the fact or the checking on the site, we're not doing any of that, but that's because there is another entity that's tasked with that item.
And then David, I have one for you, which is, I'll try and shorten this a little. The challenge in digitalization with the option of monitoring from outside Saudi Arabia for certain facilities is the challenge is things like cybersecurity, which requires the control to be from within Saudi Arabia. So do you think it will be feasible to have control from abroad using SME supports? I think what they're trying to ask is it going to be possible to use outside both international and local, I guess, cloud for trying to monitor certain aspects of the project?
Yeah, it has to do with data sovereignty and data security. And so how the data and what is the data and the type of the data that's stored. So, you know, Saudi Arabia has some quite clear rules and regulations of what needs to be kept within the kingdom, what can be kept abroad. I think the interesting thing with the different platforms that have been that are adopted globally in our sector is now that they're cloud-based, they often rely on an underlying, you know, Azure framework or an Amazon framework, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so the challenge has been in adopting a lot of that technologies is you're unable to house the data within the kingdom because the underlying platform and structure is housed on an external cloud. What the kingdom is moving towards, as Andrew was sort of discussing on the national cloud strategy, is having those platforms being able to be utilised within the kingdom. So it doesn't prevent you from working outside the kingdom on the information, but the information itself must be housed within the kingdom in the main, and depending on the sort of classification of the data. So that's been the challenge. It is understood, it's been identified, and there's a path to actually resolving that. And, you know, all the big players in this field, or the cloud-based players in this field, do have a program over the next, you know, 1 to 2 years of establishing their platforms in cloud servers within the country to address that national strategy.
Andrew, I've got a question here, which in truth would probably require a long answer, but you've got a short amount of time.
Okay.
Which is, what kind of steps are you taking to try and make sure that with your digital transformation, you avoid failure?
Yes, that is a long question. Very simply, we are taking, first of all, robust processes and robust technologies. So by robust, meaning that they are in production technologies, not, however, necessarily in production for what we need them for. So, because as I was saying earlier, we want to have the technologies that have come to maturity in the last 5 years, not the last 20. So, but as the way technology works is the technologies in the last 5 years are built on top of what would happen before. So the reality is that the way to avoid failure is, firstly, look at the robustness of processes and technologies. Secondly, involve all the stakeholders, and thirdly, have a pilot to production approach, not the big bang.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, I've spoken to a lot of people who've said very similar. Not big bang, small project, pilot projects. Work out how it works best, and then take that forwards, building on it. We have the results from our poll, and interesting is the number one isn't what I was expecting it to be, I have to admit, because Samuel was talking about procurement and supply chain, and I thought it was very good points, and I agree with him that when you've got such large scale building plans, you know, the supply chain can be a real challenge in terms of making sure everything's in place, be that people or materials. But actually, most people think that it's digitalization and technology and modern methods of constructions will be the biggest enablers. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I had so many more questions and we simply couldn't get through them all. I think maybe what we'll try and do is publish those questions so that you can see them and see what other people were talking about. We'll try and take some of these questions and produce more content around it as well. I'm hoping to talk to some of the people on this panel separately at a later date. So again, some of these questions I'll try and incorporate into that, and we will let people know when that happens. But as I said, we have unfortunately run out of time. We do need to move into a break. Our next session will be in 10 minutes, which will focus on digital value frameworks that ensure return on investment. So with that, thank you to all the speakers. I think it's been a really interesting session. Lots of deep insight as well, which I really liked. I think we did delve a little bit below the surface with this conversation. And thank you for your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all, but we will try and do something with them in the future. Thank you very much.